Hey everyone. Veronica's story is fairly short, since she's a relatively new character that appears in only 2 chapters. As usual, I'm telling her story in a chronological order, so the first part of the video is about her new chapter, which covers her backstory. That said, let's get into it. Linus was a researcher that was studying human consciousness transfer into mechanoids. His research had been unsuccessful, but believing in him, Isabel had founded this project and eventually married him, making him part of the wealthy Everett family. Isabel had been affected by an incurable disease, and after her death, Linus had attempted to transfer her consciousness into a mechanoid. Dolores, their daughter, had discovered about her father's research, and upon entering the laboratory in their basement, she had found a mechanoid with the incomplete memories of her mother. Linus was still struggling to fully reproduce Isabel's consciousness within the mechanoid, and obsessed with his research, he had attempted to use Dolores as well, believing that her consciousness could have helped him stabilize the one within the mechanoid. The process would have erased Dolores' own consciousness, killing her, but Edmund, their butler, ended up killing Linus, rescuing Dolores. After that incident, Dolores realized that she had inherited her mother's disease. Partially paralyzed, she wanted to continue her father's research, with the ultimate goal of transferring her own consciousness into a mechanoid, replacing her broken body. Dolores used the wealth of the Everett family to hire many researchers in order to continue her father's experiments. Also obsessed with this project, she had ordered Edmund to eliminate anyone that failed or complained, but upon discovering that Edmund was secretly letting them go, Dolores had killed him instead and transferred his consciousness into a mechanoid that was fully under her control. A mechanoid that she named the Overseer, her most loyal tool. Eventually, in order to obtain more samples and more funds for the experiment, Dolores had used her fortune to build an arena for mechanoids. Her goal was to test mechanoid strength, looking for a suitable body, and make even more money by allowing people to bet on their brutal matches. Since she had been first activated, Veronica's only purpose had been to fight at the Everett's arena against other mechanoids. Each mechanoid had been programmed with that goal in mind, and they would obtain freedom only after destroying all their opponents across multiple matches. Because of this, every mechanoid fought until the very end, even when they knew that their probability of success will be almost zero against the sum of their opponents. From her very first battle, Veronica developed an intense hatred toward the humans, which found pleasure in watching mechanoids kill one another. Knowing that defeated mechanoids ended up being scrapped and recycled, Veronica had attempted to hold back, hoping that they would simply surrender, but the behavior made them even more aggressive since it would increase their chances of success. Also, every mechanoid had been equipped with an electroshock collar, used to restrain them whenever they refused to comply or displayed abnormal behavior. Since her very first match, Veronica had drawn Dolores' attention, impressed by her strength and determination, and she was planning to transfer her own consciousness within Veronica's body. Serra was a young technician that worked at the Everett arena, repairing and upgrading mechanoids before their battles. Her father had been heavily indebted due to gambling, and he had attempted to pay it off as an Everett's consortium slave. After his death, Serra had been forced to work in his stead until the debt was fully repaid. She was forced to live in the workshops beneath the arena, and each work hour was deducted from the years that she needed to repay her father's death. However, work hours were also used to acquire food and basic supplies, and even minor transgressions, like failing to complete her work in time or criticizing the company, extended her permanence at the arena, making her nothing more than a slave. One day, Serra had been assigned with repairing Veronica's frame after a fight. Upon walking into Veronica's room, Serra had been impressed by her human-like appearance, which was fairly different in comparison to most of the other mechanoids. However, Veronica had immediately seized her neck, demanding Serra to remove the collar around her own neck. Struggling to breathe, Serra explained that doing so would trigger an alarm, and then the both of them would be executed by the Overseer. Veronica didn't care, but Hammer, Serra's mechanical companion, attempted to save her from Veronica, ramming into her even if it was causing no damage to Veronica's armored frame. However, when Veronica attempted to destroy Hammer, Serra tried to protect it, shielding it from Veronica's blow. After everything that she had seen from the human spectators in the arena, this action surprised Veronica, but after detecting a delay in Serra's scheduled work, Overseer arrived in the area to check on her. He demanded the reason of her tardiness, but instead of reporting Veronica's assault, Serra simply apologized for not having completed her work in time. She knew that withholding information from Overseer could cost her a month of work hours, but she didn't want to put Veronica in trouble, even if she just attempted to kill her. During another match in the arena, Veronica refused to finish her opponent off. Overseer had attempted to force her to comply, activating the electroshock collar around her neck, but she still refused those orders, attacking it instead. However, still damaged by her previous battles, Veronica missed its core, and Overseer activated its termination protocols. It was about to execute Veronica, but Dolores ordered it to stop. After all, Veronica was her property, and she wanted to acquire that body for herself. After the match, Serra fixed Veronica's damaged frame in her own room, even if it was outside of her working hours. Veronica's hatred toward humans had not diminished, but after witnessing Serra's friendliness and consideration towards her and other mechanoids, Veronica started to open up to her. After all, they both despised that place, and they both wanted to escape. Pushed by Veronica's determination, Serra had been scouting for potential escape routes using the footage gathered by other mechanoids, and eventually she had used that information to prepare an escape plan with Veronica. When they attempted to escape, everything went smoothly until they were about to approach the exit, where they were swarmed by armed mechanoids, as if aware of their plans. Overseer was with them, and he congratulated Serra for exposing Veronica's intentions. Rocco, another technician and Serra's old mentor, had discovered about her plans and informed Overseer in order to protect her, directing all the blame towards Veronica. Serra didn't know about any of this, but Veronica, overwhelmed by an intense feeling of betrayal, attempted to kill her until she was forced into submission by Overseer. Regardless of Rocco's betrayal, Dolores had been observing Serra and Veronica's interaction through her surveillance cameras all along. She knew about their relationship, and now she wanted to use Serra to help her obtain Veronica's body. Dolores needed Serra's expertise to proceed with the consciousness transfer. However, during the procedure, Serra managed to input some additional commands that were not detected by the security systems. These commands allowed Veronica to awake during the procedure, overloading her frame and pushing it to the limit. Still enraged towards Serra, Veronica destroyed the restraints and smashed through the reinforced glass, attempting to kill her. Influenced by Dolores' consciousness that had been connected with her during the procedure, Veronica started to experience some mind deviation, and when she fully regained her senses, she found Serra in a pool of her own blood, struggling to keep the security doors open to allow Veronica to escape. Veronica realized that Serra had been on her side all along, and that she had been deceived by Dolores, but as she attempted to escape with Serra, they ended up being captured by security mechanoids. Eventually, Dolores reactivated Veronica. Since Serra disobeyed her orders, Dolores had transferred her consciousness into a mechanoid, acquiring full control over her, and as a punishment, she made her fight Veronica in the arena. Veronica refused to attack Serra, trying to make her stop, but during that fight, the arena security bots suddenly go haywire, damaging Veronica before starting to attack each other. Even the human spectators were being killed by the bots, and during the chaos, Serra regained her senses and dragged the injured Veronica away from the arena. Despite having been turned into a mechanoid, Serra retained a portion of her consciousness, and she uses her remaining strength to help Veronica, fixing her frame and installing a pair of wings, something that she had planned to give her when they first started to dream about their escape. When she awakens, Veronica finds Serra's corpse laying beside her. She had completed her task, and she had sacrificed herself to help Veronica, giving her an opportunity to finally leave that place. Veronica destroyed the corrupted mechanoids that were blocking her path, and eventually confronted Dolores, confined in a room by the medical devices that were keeping her alive. Dolores summoned Overseer to deal with Veronica, which pushed her into the arena, but after a long confrontation, Veronica eventually disables the other mechanoid. Unable to fulfill her wish, Dolores had nothing to live for. She taunted Veronica, hoping that she would just kill her, but upon realizing this, Veronica decided to let her live. However, now infected by the punishing virus, Overseer reactivated itself and killed Dolores. Unconcerned, Veronica retrieved Serra's body and left the destroyed Everett arena. She saw the world for the first time, and after traveling for a while through deserted snowfields, she eventually finds a warmer place. Even if Veronica still didn't fully understand everything that Serra had told her, she believed that Serra would have liked that place, and so she buried her there. Since she had left the arena, Veronica had wanted to find her kin, a wicked mechanoid just like her. Eventually, she ended up joining the Church of Machina, whose primary goal was to help one another and build a safe world for machines. As a member of the church, Veronica was given the title of Justice as a sign of strength and determination to fight for her fellow mechanoids. Eventually, Veronica traveled to Tsiolkovsky Aerospace City to meet SDC-39, another awakened mechanoid that had been named Hanged Man by the Church. Aerospace City was a very advanced city that relied on machines in order to function. The city had been used to build and launch many spacecrafts into orbit at the end of the Golden Age, and after the punishing augury, it had not been infected by the virus because of its isolated location, which had given them enough time to install a central purification filter and mostly cut their connection to the rest of the world. Despite this, humans in Aerospace City still feared the punishing virus, and Veronica had warned SDC-39, saying that they were not to be trusted. She had asked SDC-39 to leave the city with her to join the Church of Machina, but SDC-39 still dreamed of a future in which humans could fully coexist with mechanoids, inspired by the words of its own creator. SDC-39 decided to stay in Aerospace City to complete the Bifrost, a magnetic accelerator track that will be able to send even bigger spacecrafts into orbit. However, that same day, Aerospace City research team had found traces of punishing virus in SDC-39 analysis report. Fearing further contamination, they had decided to destroy it, melting its frame. Upon learning of SDC-39's execution, Veronica reported its death to the Church and then cut her own ties to it. By herself, Veronica overthrew the regime of Aerospace City and established herself as the new ruler of the city, eliminating the humans that attempted to regain control and enslaving the others, forcing them to work extensively in exchange for basic supplies. Alexei, one of the researchers at Aerospace City, had been friends with SDC-39 before its execution, and Veronica had appointed him as the new governor of the city. This position didn't hold any real power, but Alexei was supposed to be a mediator between humans and machines. He had eventually convinced Veronica to be more lenient, but because of his position, Alexei had always been considered a traitor by most humans. Over the years, Yulia, the daughter of the previous director of the city that had been executed by Veronica, had helped many humans survive during Veronica's tyranny. Dmitri, another awakened mechanoid and Yulia's companion, had assisted her, leading many humans to her while pretending to be a regular mechanoid. Observing the city from the highest skyscrapers, Veronica knew about this, but she had initially decided to ignore them since they didn't pose a real threat. During this time, there have been only occasional skirmishes between humans and mechanoids, which were often instructed to not use lethal force, but the situation became worse and worse as humans intensified their attacks, almost killing Alexei himself. Alexei had been ambushed by a group of armed humans when he had been retrieving some supplies outside of the city, and he was found severely injured by Hanying. Hanying, another mechanoid of the Church of Machina, had received a new frame after being injured by Schultz in Cologne. However, she regained her senses inside a transport convoy that was delivering supplies to Aerospace City. Her communication with the Church had been disrupted by an interference that was affecting the Great Tower, but she still managed to contact Cervantes, which was also away from the Church. From Cervantes, Hanying learned that the convoy was also transporting a key the Sage had left behind. Cervantes was planning to return to the Church in order to fix the Great Tower, and so he asked Hanying to retrieve the key from Aerospace City. He also told her that it was the last place visited by Veronica before they lost contact with her, years before Hanying had been reawakened by the Church. Hanying had never met them, but she knew about Veronica and SDC-39, since she had inherited its title of Hanged Man. After being rescued by Hanying, Alexei had led her to Aerospace City, informing her about the current situation between humans and mechanoids. Alexei had always wished to become a mechanoid himself, slowly upgrading his body with mechanical implants. Veronica told him that even with those modifications, he will never truly become a mechanoid, but over time, Alexei himself had become more hostile towards his fellow humans, pushing Veronica to complete the development of the Bifrost. Even if its purpose was to send spacecrafts in orbit, the magnetic accelerator would be able to launch anything into space, becoming a dangerous weapon that could even strike Babylonia directly. Alexei wanted to help Veronica fulfill her dream, building a world dominated by machines. However, powering up the Bifrost required multiple charging cycles from the cold fusion reactor in the city, and during a routine surface scan, Babylonia detected an abnormal high-power signal coming from that area. The Grey Raven Commandant and Liv had been sent to investigate the signal, and upon reaching the area, Dmitri had found them and escorted them into Aerospace City, avoiding its defenses and leading them to Yulia. Once there, we learned about the situation in Aerospace City from Yulia, and eventually we met Hanying, which we had previously encountered in Cologne. Since she was also a mechanoid, Hanying wanted to talk to Veronica, persuading her to put an end to this conflict, but we decided to contact Alexei, trying to negotiate a deal with him and Babylonia. Upon meeting Hanying, Veronica welcomed her to stay in the city as long as she didn't interfere, wary of her friendliness towards humans, even if it was a trait that she shared with SDC-39, the previous hanged man. In the meantime, we were attempting to negotiate with Alexei, but from the very beginning, something felt off about our conversation, as if he didn't care about any of this, and everything that he was saying was meant to incite even more animosity between the two factions. Doubting our own intentions, the leader of the human resistance ambushed Alexei during our negotiation, which pushed Veronica into an even more violent retaliation. Knowing about Yulia's involvement in protecting human refugees, Veronica forced her to reveal their current location by threatening to kill Dmitri. We were part of those refugees, and Veronica imprisoned us in a secure spacecraft hangar. Hanying learned what had happened from Alexei himself. He gave her the access code of the hangar and asked her to stop Veronica before the situation could escalate even further. Hanying didn't know if she could trust Alexei, especially since he didn't seem in full control of himself. She still followed his instructions, eventually rescuing us from the hangar, and upon learning about her interaction with Alexei, we start to suspect that someone had been influencing him. This behavior reminded us of Schultz, the emperor that had betrayed the Church of Machina, which had worked with Cradle to attack the city of Cologne, hacking into the Tabula Casha in the attempt to destroy it. His ultimate goal was to eliminate humanity, building a world dominated by machines, and it seemed like he had been manipulating Veronica herself to achieve that objective. Hanying had learned that SDC-39 had been killed because the humans had noticed traces of punishing virus in its analysis report. However, awakened machines were immune to the punishing virus, so Schultz had altered the report, pushing them into killing SDC-39 so they could use that excuse to manipulate Veronica. Controlled by Schultz, Alexei pushed Veronica into activating the Bifrost. He knew that Babylonia will never let it fire and that it will destroy the city with the Longinus arsenal before that happened, but Schultz was willing to sacrifice his skin to push the rest of the church into taking a more aggressive stance towards humans. As the Bifrost initiated its last charging cycle, Hanying confronted Veronica once again. She warned Veronica about Schultz, telling her everything that they had discovered, but Veronica still believed that humans and machines could not coexist, and that humans still deserved to die for what they had done. Unable to find a compromise, Veronica and Hanying fight against each other. Eventually, Hanying defeats Veronica, but taking advantage of her injuries, Schultz takes over Alexei's body and attacks Veronica, attempting to destroy her core and gain control of her own frame. At the last moment, Alexei struggled to regain control over his body. He apologized to Veronica, telling her that everything had been his fault. He was the one that had made a deal with Schultz, augmenting his own body more and more in the attempt to become a mechanoid, but in reality, each new modification had only given Schultz more control over his body. In order to protect Veronica, Alexei stabbed himself before Schultz could regain control. After Alexei's death, Veronica handed the key to stop the Bifrost to Hanying and relinquished her control over the city mechanoids. Veronica still believed that humans and machines had no future together and that one of them will have to prevail over the other. However, Schultz had done something that she couldn't forgive. SDC-39 and many other mechanoids had died because of him, sacrificing his own kin for his personal ambition. Veronica left Aerospace City and returned to the Church of Machina, vowing to hunt down Schultz, which had also been responsible for the malfunction of the Great Tower. Nanami had already attempted to destroy Schultz after he had attacked Cologne with Cradle, but since it was a rogue AI generated from Gestalt, Schultz didn't have a stable physical form, and so it was very hard to track him down and erase him completely. That's it for Veronica's story so far. She is still one of my favorite characters, but unfortunately her backstory was fairly disappointing. We didn't really learn anything about her creation or how she joined the Church of Machina, which should have been the most important parts about her past. Also, the entire plot of her chapter was very weak. There were too many parts that didn't make much sense, and they were just there to push the story in a certain direction, which is quite disappointing for a character like Veronica, especially if we compare her backstory to Haikma and Hanying, just to mention two other members of the church. The story could have also been an opportunity to connect Veronica with Spooner, another member of the church that used to fight in an arena to entertain humans, before escaping with Fushan. However, despite their similar backgrounds, there was no mention of either. And sure, it could have been a completely different arena, but the main issue is that Veronica's story wasn't really connected to anything, when it's usually the main purpose of backstories. Oh well, hopefully they can give her justice in the future, making her more involved in the main story. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.